Teen Drug and Substance Abuse: How Does It Affect One's Relationships? A documentary by Maggie Fernandez. Here's a quick question. Have you ever taken ibuprofen for headaches? Have you ever consumed NyQuil to ensure a restful night? As a society, we view drugs as an aid to support our well-being. Even though drugs may be helpful, we must understand they have physical consequences. The real important question is, how do these physical consequences affect one's relationships? Currently, misguided behavior is at a peak among teenagers, and it is essential to provide awareness regarding addiction. If we go back to the previous century, drugs have always been a very controversial issue. In the 1980s, cocaine was being sold at low prices, increasing its demand. As its popularity increased, so did the addiction rate, not only in adults, but in teenagers as well. This influenced the First Lady, Nancy Reagan, to start the Just Say No campaign, encouraging citizens, especially young adults and children, to say no to experimenting with drugs. This campaign made a difference in the struggle against drug consumption and the effort to combat the crack epidemic. However, today, awareness is brought through a different medium. The HBO Max television series Euphoria, created by Sam Levinson, does an excellent job of displaying the negative consequences of drug consumption, which include deteriorating relationships and rehabilitation. In the show, there are multiple occurrences of the main character, Rue, having intense lash-outs after overdosing on drugs, and later proceeding to take it out on others. One of the most intense lash-outs was between Rue and her mother. Rue's mother had discovered that Rue had relapsed and was taking drugs again. When her mother insisted on taking her to the hospital to seek medical assistance, Rue became physically violent towards her mother, as well as her sister. The article, Family Attachment May Inhibit Teen Drug Use, states, over 40% of adolescents living in one-parent households who did not have a good relationship with their mother use alcohol or other drugs. From this piece of evidence, we understand that there could be precursors to drug addiction. These precursors don't necessarily have to be drug-related, and it shows how adults could cause teenagers to turn to drugs. This evidence supports Rue's current situation. Rue's loss of her father has negatively affected her relationship with her mother. This is important to understand because the relationship between Rue and her mother had already been on the decline when Rue began her addiction. With the now added drug addiction, the relationship has developed into a more toxic physical situation. Not only do drugs negatively affect family relationships, but it also has the power to break apart long-term friendships. The deterioration of Rue and Lexi's friendship began soon after Rue began to associate herself with drugs. Her addiction caused Rue to push Lexi out of her life and now surround herself with other drug addicts, as well as drug dealers. The article, Positive and Negative Consequences of Continued Drug Use, states, in most cases, addicted individuals end up isolating themselves and spend very little time with other people. Most of their social interaction involves other substance users. This evidence shows the type of lifestyle that addicts live. It is one of solitude, loneliness, and only involving other addicts like themselves. Drug addicts surrounding themselves with other drug addicts makes it difficult for addicts to rehabilitate and overcome the drug addiction. Rue lives a very similar lifestyle, where she abandons her best friend only to replace her with other addicts, like herself. This is important to understand because surrounding yourself with bad influences does not allow a person to better themselves. Specifically, an addict will not overcome their addiction if they associate with other addicts. Reasoning to why teens use drugs in the first place may be to open up inner thoughts and emotions. However, this may not be the best tactic to help sort out personal feelings. For instance, Rue in Euphoria was able to open up and reveal to one of her friends that her ex-boyfriend was seeing another one of their close friends. In the article, Experienced Drug Users Assess the Relative Harms and Benefits of Drugs, states, respondents emphasize MDMA's and pathological effects, that it can help people open up. This piece of evidence shows how drug users utilize drugs as a means to feel more comfortable in expressing themselves. During the years of upcoming of age, teens can be extremely judgmental and critical of their peers. This causes difficulty for other teens to be able to share their thoughts and feelings. This leads to many teens consuming drugs. Although Rue was able to open up with the aid of drugs, the way she approached the situation was inappropriate and caused more conflict between her friends. This is important to understand because drugs affect people's thought processes and can cause them to not take consequences into consideration. As much as the term drug abuse has a negative connotation, there are individuals that support its use, claiming that there are positive effects. In the television series Euphoria, the main character Rue lost her father due to the deadly illness of cancer. Rue, not knowing how to deal with the idea and pain of her father's passing, influenced her to make the irrational decision to consume drugs. The article, 5 Major Reasons for Teen and Youth Relapse, states, depression, trauma, suicidal thoughts, anxiety, and other mental disturbances may lead to self-medication and therefore teen or youth addiction. This evidently shows how teens that have experienced trauma and gone through a lot of difficulties in their lives view drugs as a way to escape from the real world and the sadness it brings upon them. Essentially, teens may use drugs to numb the pain they feel from trauma. Even though there is evidence to support the opposition, drug abuse is a negative action with serious consequences. For instance, Rue had to deal with the traumatic loss of her father, and the only way she could escape from this traumatic experience is to consume drugs. She sought solace in her misguided behavior and addiction. This is important to understand because even though drug consumption can alleviate an individual from certain unwanted feelings, addiction always causes destruction to those associated with the addict. My proposal for a solution to help solve this dilemma is to properly educate the youth at an early age. It would be ideal to begin to bring awareness to the drug issue in the school setting. As a teenager myself living in the modern world, I've observed and taken note on how the media has normalized teen drug use by making it out to be perceived as cool and trendy. In this aspect, Euphoria is a positive show because it depicts the reality of drug and substance abuse. However, one show isn't good enough to bring attention to all adolescents. This is why school needs to adopt an anti-drug curriculum and equip adolescents with the tools to combat drug use. For instance, one of the ways to get the message across to the youth is to bring guest speakers to schools that have personal experience with drug addiction at an early age and explain how they have overcome their addiction. Empowering the youth with the knowledge of this issue may lessen the number of future young adults experimenting with drugs and eventually becoming addicted to drugs. Overall, we as a society should bring awareness to the harms of drug consumption instead of upholding the idea of unprescribed drugs to be beneficial. If we do not make a change and follow the listed solutions, we as a society will continue to live in a world of teens consuming drugs daily. Consequently, the rate of consumption will increase along with the crime rate and risk of health problems. Instead of continuing to be a reactive society, we should lean more towards creating a productive society that will plan to prevent future drug abuse, because society benefits from fewer addicts and more productive and healthy individuals.